Sunand Prasad is co-founder and principal of architect Pinoy & Prasad, and they joined forces with Perkins & Will at the end of last year. He's a former president of the RIBA, a mayor's design advocate, and since October this year, the chairman of UKGBC. So Sunand, tell me first about your merger with Perkins & Will. You seem to be very different types of practices, but what was the attraction?
Well, contrary to appearances, or some appearances, we're not so different. They're certainly larger. They were founded in the 30s. At that time, they would have looked very like the start of Pinoy & Prasad, working in the public sector, designing schools, healthcare buildings, and so on. And they've built a very large company over the years with a huge degree of autonomy to the local offices and a sense that it's a family of different types of practice, but united by a huge range of shared values. They've been committed to sustainability for a long time, maybe not to the same extent that some of us have been in the architecture sphere, but they nevertheless have been, and increasingly they are totally on side. It was a key point of conversation, obviously. They also have a fabulous research base. They do invest in research. They're very evidence-based. And there's so much to like about our cultures, about our ways of being, the huge emphasis placed on design, about a collegiate view of life. So actually we have a lot in common. And we do bring something special, and with the underpinning of their global reach, and of course, of particular personal interest, is their enormous capacity in healthcare. We thought we'd make a good match. That was the attraction. And obviously, there's also the resilience issue. And I think COVID has shown that we need all the resilience we can get.
So as a Mayor of London's design advocate, you've been in the forefront of discussions, not just around sustainability, but also around wider strategic issues of the London plan and shaping the capital. How do you think we need to address some of the issues that the London plan looks at in the post-COVID city? Do you think we actually even need to rewrite the plan?
Some areas, I think that the plan would need to be rewritten, but certainly I don't see COVID as occasioning a rewrite of the London plan, because whilst COVID changes certain fundamental things, and it's an extraordinary wake-up call, and it's also a catalyst for changes that were happening at a slower pace that need to happen quicker. I think that we need to learn the lessons from it, but actually, rather than see it as sort of a functional fact that changes the facts on ground and therefore we have to rethink everything, we should see it as an amazing kind of a little slap by nature to say, listen, you think this is bad. Climate change is something else, and you're sleepwalking into it. We should therefore undertake, it sounds like a cliche because so many people have said it, which is the new Green Deal for London. A new Green Deal is something that a lot of people have been saying, but actually maybe it's a cliche because it has so much truth in it. I think we do need a green recovery plan. We need to put climate change high on the agenda, but not only climate change. I think equality, equity are a very key issue. I think a fairer, better distribution opportunities for more people has to be integral to that. I think that all that should run through the London plan, like words through a stick of rock. And I think that is what I would say. And we've been talking about individual points. I mean, for example, what is London? Is London just really the inside the M25? There's a vast hinterland of London, which we don't take into account. And yet we need, climate change tells us to look not only far further into the future than the market is used to looking, or indeed built for looking. And that's why it fails to see it, but also far further afield from our narrow areas of concern. And I think that there is a frame of mind, which actually, once you describe it, it's not so difficult to grasp, with which if that if that then leads to some different lenses to look at what we're doing in London, I think that that's the way I would phrase it. And there are some very concrete things, including, of course, action on climate change, the circular economy, on which I've been participating especially. And there are some very encouraging things in the London plan. I think maybe it's just a question of going a bit further, faster. And I think the population is ready for it. I think that maybe now the population is ahead of the politicians on this one.
And the more equitable society is a part of that. And in that light, you've long been involved with Article 25, which takes architect skills out to areas of need around the world. But things are going to get tougher for organizations like that in the future, particularly as the government obviously is cutting back. It looks like it's cutting back on some of its overseas expenditure. What are the sort of things that Article 25 is doing at the moment and really will need support in the coming months and years?
Article 25 has had a bit of a breakthrough in terms of scale. So we're involved in the reconstruction of homes in Dominica, which followed the hurricane and now I think 2 years ago, with enormous destruction. 90% of the property was affected. I mean, it's a huge catastrophe. And they are joining into this with a tremendous will to not only build back, but build back for a resilient and sustainable future. And we are involved in the delivery of 1,700 homes there. A pilot project has already been launched. We're just building a few homes. I mean, obviously, this is all about replicability and refinement of a model. This is where architectural skills come in. But as always with Article 25, it's not us going somewhere else and saying, this is how you do it, stand back. It's actually about learning a huge amount from what has worked so well and working with people on the ground, with the government and Dominican agencies to create something that really works. So Article 25 can still needs all the help it can get to do that, because as you know, from having been there from the start and helped Article 25 so much over the years, more than any other single person, I think, that we deliver design solutions, and it's design which is the key. But that design is what we need paying for. So all the money that people give goes directly to supporting the design effort from Article 25 and the project management and the skilling and the training. And it's tough. It's charities.
Now you just started your chairmanship of UK Green Building Council, although you've been involved with the organisation for a long time. But this does seem to be auspicious, with just recently Boris Johnson announcing plans for a green industrial recovery. And of course, we've got COP26 in Glasgow next year. What do you see as the sort of key priorities among so many right now?
Well, it is a very auspicious time, Peter, and I feel very lucky to taking this on right now with so many tailwinds. The last being, of course, not so much the government's 10-point plan, welcome though much of it is. It's actually the consensus between the parties. We're back to a situation that hasn't existed since the late noughties, and when 2006, 7, 8, 9, all the parties were united about climate change pretty much. We thought the penny had dropped. We thought the world was going to change then. And since then, there have really been 10, 13 pretty wasted years in many ways as regards government action, which is lamentable. But we are back on track. And then we have, fortunately, Biden squeaking through, which completely changes the picture. Suddenly, from less than a half to well over a half, over 60% of the world's GDP is under some kind of climate commitment. And that's a very big difference. And you mentioned COP coming up, but I would also add, in terms of the favorable climate, the enormous actions of 2019. 2019 will still be remembered as the year the school kids came out and there were an Extinction Rebellion did its bit. But I would also add to it Rishi Sunak's announcements that TCFD reporting will be mandatory. This is a task force for climate-related financial disclosure, and making that mandatory, and just generally, many of us on the kind of climate activism end have said the first step is disclosure. Let's get savvy with the numbers. So in terms of priorities, back to UKGBC, that's absolutely vital that we help people know how to do the numbers. And we've sort of made a name with our definition, the framework definition for what zero carbon actually means. Next step is how people might arrive at those answers, which is already started as a piece of work. And then to fold that into whole life carbon accounting, we're shortly going to be publishing a roadmap for that. And the final thing I'd like to say, I mean, there are many, many initiatives going on in UKGBC, but we now have what we call a solutions unit. We think that we are past the time when it's all about raising awareness, because the awareness is now, looks like it's there. The YouGov poll last week found that only 3% of the UK public were climate skeptics. That doesn't mean that 97% are green activists. There's a long way to go. And we know in the construction industry itself, on a daily level, there are many, many barriers to doing the right thing, not least cost and finance, which are linked. But we think that we are now beyond awareness and into helping people find the answers, quite practical, pragmatic, actionable answers to the thing that they really mostly want to do. I mean, nobody's against decarbonizing the grid or having clean vehicles. And I think that it's interesting how the motor industry hasn't really squealed about the announcement of withdrawal of diesel and petrol much earlier than anticipated. Because I think the answers are there now. It's a question of setting about and doing it. And green, I mean, NLA's own work has been very interesting in the survey, which found that people want more legislation, but they also want green finance. And of those, I would say that green finance is a really critical area, and side by side with insurance practices, because climate change is a market failure, because the market, as we said before, cannot look ahead. So finance is the way in which the short and the long term are reconciled in practice, in business, and that's why it's so important. So those are the areas that UKGBC will be focusing on. Actually, already is focusing on. It's not me who's doing this; it's the team's already doing that. But I'm particularly keen on and have pushed for the solutions unit, and that's going to be, I hope. It's not easy, because you get into things like, well, who says that's true? Are you guaranteeing that these numbers are right? Will the UKGBC become a policeman? Well, we're not going to become a policeman. We're not going to police carbon compliance or anything. We don't have the capacity, and that's not the point. UKGBC is about bringing people together, and it probably has the widest reach of any organization in the industry, because it goes all the way from small builders, small practitioners, all the way to big corporates and huge companies across all disciplines, focused only on how we make our built environment zero carbon, sustainable, circular economy, biodiverse, and all those other great things that we believe in.
Very impressive. So finally, what advice have you given to Simon Alford, who's just been elected as the president-elect of the RIBA? What do you think? What do you tell him to do?
Well, I think Simon comes at a very auspicious moment as well. I think thanks to the action of the previous two presidents, the RIBA is financially more sound than it has been certainly in my period of being active since the early 90s. The RIBA has had some formidable challenges in terms of its revenue and expenditure, partly because of the legacy of a pensions scheme and so on. But that's been solved, and I think there's now no reason why all the resources RIBA can't be deployed, firstly in the service of its members, but then to help the members serve the public, and of course thereby fulfill the mission, which is to promote and support architecture, not so much architects. But of course you can only do that by working with architects. So very specifically, I would like, in some ways, in the way that I described the solutions unit, I would like people to be able to phone up the RIBA or email the RIBA, find answers to the everyday challenges of practice, which are formidable. I mean, you know, the huge proliferation of procurement systems, of contracts and so on, just the daily grind, which if that burden could be shared and our collective knowledge deployed through the RIBA, we might then be able to focus more on what we're about, which is designing great sustainable buildings. So I would just say that one thing: deploy the resources to really help members do the job. And as I've always put it, it's there to support the conditions for the practice of architecture. And if you say, think about what is it that will support the conditions which makes good practice possible, you see that it is architecture we are supporting, but it's of course through architects that you support it.
Are you at home or in the office?
I'm in the office because I'm about to go to Moorfields Eye Hospital to for a walk around their new post-COVID diagnostic lanes. This is all to do with the project that's behind me there, which is Oriel, the new home for Moorfields, and UCL Institute of Ophthalmology. So we are amazingly, you know, after 10 months of not being anywhere near it, we are having an actual site visit. So as it's quite near the office, I've come into the office to do this.
Very good. Well, thanks for doing it.
Bye-bye.